Hello.
Hello, Chazi.
Hello, Ben. Ben, what's your full name?
Ben Somech.
No, full name. Is there a middle name?
It's no middle name.
Just Ben Somech. Okay. All
I feel
right.
like middle name isn't that it's more American, right? I mean, I don't know if I know a lot of Israelis that have a middle name.
It's very Ashkenazi.
Okay, maybe that's why.
Yeah, we all have. I have three names. Many of us, my kids have three names,
Mm-hmm.
and then their last name, and then their surname. But my brother actually named after my uncle that was killed in one of the second Lebanon War, first Lebanon War. So my brother's named after him, and it was just his name, no middle name, no nothing, which is
Yeah.
more like that. But on that morbid note, uh, uh, it's good to see you, sir. And we did chapter 1 and 2, and we were moving into chapter 3.
Mm-hmm.
We're just giving some context again. Well, this is gonna swing us right back into where we were sort of in history. So, you ready?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. Antigonos ish sucho kibel משמעון הצדיק. הוא היה אומר, אל תהיו כעבדים המשמשים את הרב על מנת לקבל פרס, אלא הבו כעבדים המשמשים את הרב שלא על מנת לקבל פרס. ויהי מורא שמיים עליכם. If you don't mind, just for the translation, do you mind making that a little bigger?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So first off, we're already brought into this man's name over here, Antigonus, right?
Yeah.
The man of Sucho received the oral tradition from Shimon the righteous, right? So we were introduced to Shimon the righteous earlier. Just again, we're talking about Antigonus is a Greek name, and we're back into the Hellenistic period again. This is from when Alexander the Great comes up until the whole Maccabee War that goes on there.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see that there is, like I was mentioning last week, where we were told that Alexander the Great comes to Israel and meets Shimon, whether it's him or his father or his grandfather. Either way, he meets his character, and seemingly there is this peaceful time between the Greeks and the Jews, which down the line gets a little out of control. Either way, you could see just by the fact that everyone called their kid Alexander during that period. And here too, we see this guy named Antigonus, and clearly his parents were influenced by the period. So that's sort of putting us in context again, that while we're learning this beautiful Torah, it's happening in this, his name might as well be like, Devin, you know what I mean? It's just like his name. Now, Ish, the man of Sucho, so this is like he was seemingly the main man in charge of Sucho, like he was known over there. So this is like people that we could reference. Sucho was a place in the Upper Galilee, seemingly. It's sort of in that space. And here again, that we say Kibel Meshimon Tzadik. He received the oral tradition from Shimon the righteous. I mentioned last week how there's a difference between when we say Moses Kibel and then there's Masar. When you received it fully. When you pass it on, something gets lost in the way. So we know we lost something across the way, and then again we lose another when it goes to the men of the great assembly of the Knesset Hagdalah. But here, Antigonus Isucho Kibel Meshimon Tzadik. So he is now fully receiving with nothing, we're not losing any traditions on the way. He's fully receiving from Shimon Tzadik, and Shimon Tzadik is part of this, the original crew we were talking about.
Yeah, it so fascinates me that I know we spoke about it before. It still fascinates me of how it's like the idea of received versus it was a kibel or masal. So it's like what made, like, is it their relationship that made it so successful? What is it? Is it the fact that it was, what are
the parameters, the criteria for
Yeah, what are the affordances, the constraints for being able to receive versus to like lose more of that vitality?
So we're actually going to get into that like right now in this chapter.
Okay.
Funny enough that you're mentioning that, but I'm just going to go for a second back to Moses, and
Mm-hmm.
we're told that Moses. Well, and even on this, obviously, Jews found a way to disagree about this as well. But generally speaking, that Moses was so humble, so empty that God was speaking from his voice, and the reason
Right.
God could speak from his voice is because he was fully void of
Mm-hmm.
himself, and that's allowing one to fully receive. Right. So there's nothing else getting in the way. There's no ego getting in the way.
Right.
Just on that note, there are schools of thought that will say, no, he was fully Moses. And because he was fully Moses, he was fully the divine part of himself. And that's why he could receive. And that would be like
Mm-hmm.
literally the exact opposite. But for all intents and purposes, and the way we're going to see right now, how do we want to receive? So what did he used to say? And just in general, hu haya omer, he used to say is stressing the idea of like this was his wisdom. This was his Torah that he was known for. Right.
Right.
So if you would walk in and be like, what does Antigona say? I would be like, we all know what Antigona says. He says it all the time. He has a t-shirt that says it on it. Like he was known for it. Okay. So do not be like servants who serve the master in the expectation of receiving a reward, but be like servants who serve the master without the expectation of receiving the reward, and let the fear of heaven be upon you. Fear, they have Morah Shamayim over here, more like Yirah. I like looking at that as more as reverence and less as fear, but we'll get into that in a moment. So what are they telling us over here? Don't be, again, I'm just going to read it again. Do not be like servants who serve the master in the expectation of receiving a reward, right? So let's take a step back. What is this reward that we're even talking about? Like we're introduced to this concept of reward. There's the word pras. There's also a debate about this, whether this is coming from like the Greek term like parus, which is sort of like a tax or like some sort of gift, or there's from Hebrew paras, like prusa, like a portion of something.
Right.
And this sort of relates to how we identify pras. So is pras the reward, which is the world to come, which we know in Judaism. Some people say pras is more of a salary, like expecting to be getting a salary from your rabbi, from the guy you're following. So he's sort of like maintaining your option to just learn all the time. Either way, again, I want to ask, why are we even talking about a reward? Because it's not something that God and the prophets are going around talking about constantly about, do this because then you're going to get the world to come, or like, you're expected to do these things. And this is again where you could see the influences of the Greek culture on the Jews. So going back to like Plato, Jews were very influenced by this and probably started talking more often about these concepts of like, there being life after death and there being like some sort of reward. Now, in Judaism, there is a conversation about this. However, during the time of the first temple, there was really no need to have this kind of discussion. Like the mindset of most of like the general guy living in Tiberias during the first temple is like, I'm dealing with my crops and I hope it's going to rain. And then like, that's going to happen. And I'm going to exactly. And go to the temple. And if I have like lofty questions, I'll ask the prophet, and the prophet will be like, yeah, we do have wisdom about this, but we don't talk about this all the time. However, once the temple was destroyed and the Shekhinah is gone, by the way, which is also why idol worship was something that we were still very connected to, because there was a sense of, divinity sort of, it was palpable, it was in the air. But because it was sort of in the air, there was no reason to sort of having this. We were too busy bringing the divinity down, whether thinking like, what happens when we die and how do I find the divinity in the afterlife? However, as in this day and age, it's very much the conversation in Judaism, in religious circles about like, what is going to be. And so just again putting this sort of into context, which this really wasn't something we were discussing up until now, and then this sort of comes onto the scene about like what is in the world to come and how do we think about this.
I have a
So
question.
sure.
So, do you think this is a little broader, but maybe specifically also about the world to come? Do you think that is a good thing or a bad thing that now this is becomes a focus? And I'll tell you why I'm asking this is because I think I don't know if where I heard it, but maybe you can think about Hasidut as something like we need to. Hasidut was like we need to explain something to people because now they're asking for more. They're at a level where there is an idea of like a certain fall or like getting away from the light, but there is also maybe a view of again like there is higher expectations from people. They want to know more. They need more. So there's like a good and bad in it. I feel like there is something good and bad. So that is kind of like the context of that question.
So yeah, let's unpack that for a minute. And that obviously, is dovetailing very well with like what I was just mentioning earlier about like during that period, like with the prophets, where it wasn't sort of necessary to have that kind of discussion.
Uh-huh.
And this also goes back to God speaking to Moses and telling him that when I was speaking to Abraham, Be'el Shaddai nodati lahem, right? I spoke to them at a different version of God and the different version of how I present myself in the world, seemingly like at a lower level. And Moses is talking to God in the name of the Tetragrammaton, and there's a much more there's a much deeper understanding and a deeper connection there that Moses is reaching. Now, I'm bringing it back to what you were mentioning now. Like you said about the Chassidut, and Rav Kook, who is also a Chassid, talks about this as well, that there was a time where this deep wisdom, whether we see little hints of it with the chariot of Ezekiel and later on with like the Heichalot and the Yerdei HaMerkavah, there's different periods in the first temple, second temple, when this starts coming up more and more and more. And the Talmud talks about this. You don't study Maaseh Bereshit and you don't study Merkavah, which is physics and metaphysics. You don't study that with one person. Some you study alone, because this was very esoteric, and you only study Kabbalah when you're 40 years old. However, like you just mentioned, while some people will seem like as we've got more lost and now we need more light shining towards us, I look at it as we have come so far and as we've over the years have, like dwarfs on the shoulders of giants, we have a much more robust sort of understanding. Now, it is true that there's something about the Israelite leaving Egypt that his relationship was a lot more palpable, but and ours is a lot more abstract. However, as humanity was trying to dig deeper and expose more of the wisdom, whether it's Aristotle, whether it's Plato, then it was necessary for us to rediscover our own ancient wisdom. And then this really turned into Torah that can no longer be hidden. It can't be ganuz anymore. Rather, it really needs to be spread. The message has to be spread, and this information has to be brought to light. And that is definitely is the revival of Chassidut and what it tried to do with all its teachings of Kabbalah and how it brought it down to the people. And while a lot of that could sometimes get abused and turned into, like a cartoon version of it, of someone dancing on the car, like sort of drugged out of his mind. On the other hand, you are talking about Torah that is, when taught right, as sweet as honey and engaging and mind bending, and also overlaps very much on different worldly traditions and different mystical traditions, which opens up a different question of like, are these all true paths? Is there one specific path? Either way, if we want to be part of if we want to connect to the divine, we want to be using the best frequencies possible. And at this day and age, when we don't have the temple and we no longer require the sacrifice, we are demanding a truer, more authentic, potentially more sophisticated relationship and more embodied relationship. And a lot of that is you can reach through Chassidut and Kabbalah. And this little corner, John Vervaeke, Jonathan Peugeot, all of them in their own way are, dancing around with these concepts. Hence, I think like all the interest
Mhm.
in it. So does that
Yeah.
answer that question or?
Yeah, no, I think it's clear. I think, yeah, it's an interesting, and like you said, with more sophistication, but it's also good to I guess to remember that sophistication comes with its own problems. So yeah, so
So as I mentioned, if as you know,
Mhm.
when you start seeing the similarities, that's when you need to start feeling very comfortable, sort of in your tradition,
Yeah,
to be able to then still create some sort of safeguard or structure that allows you to move your way through. Because and as we'll see also, or we won't see, but this is true about this chapter we're reading over here. A lot of people misunderstood his words over here, and because of that, they. Well, we'll get into that in a moment. But even Kabbalah and the way it talks about the Shekhinah and the this feminine and its feminine attributes, this clearly had effects on Christianity. Some seemingly things were misunderstood. Looking at that could seem very, very confusing to a lot of people that are growing up learning that God has no face and no body, and then very quickly we start talking about all these different uh, 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 analogies that are very, very confusing to the uninitiated, and hence it needs to be done with care. But that doesn't mean we ignore it. What it means is that you should be teaching halacha and agadah alongside Kabbalah, all as one package that you read together, and
yeah,
allows you sort of to flow through it and not feel like, oh, that's like woo woo, and I don't want to be touching that. Rather, I need to integrate that and allow me to now reread these halachic texts through this prism.
yeah.
Um,
And personally, that I mean, for somebody uninitiated like myself, personally reading the Tanya alongside this, alongside Mishnah Torah, is very helpful.
yes, I would agree. Um, yes, I agree. Uh, just one more mention on the world to come.
Hmm.
There are enough. There are enough examples in the Bible. Let's say the witch of Endor, when Samuel raises Saul up. Saul raises Samuel up with this necromancer, and she
Hmm.
brings him up from the dead. Now, that would be an indication that in the Bible they were aware of a world past this world, but no one felt the need to talk about that all the time. That wasn't like the discussion, even though there's like reference to it. Um, okay, so back to our students. We don't want you, the student, doing good deeds and following God's way because you are assuming you are going to be getting a reward. Rather, we want you to be as servants who are serve their master without the expectation of receiving a reward. Now, what are they trying to teach us when they're saying this? So, since it's confusing, he had two students, Sadok and Beitus, I think, that really got completely confused about this. Thought that there is no afterlife or world to come, not afterlife, a
Hmm.
world to come, and they opened up. That was their school of thought, and they really led many people astray. There's a philosopher, a religious philosopher, a rabbi named Yeshayahu Leibovich, and he also doesn't believe that there is a olam haba, a world to come, and he believes like the essence of the commandments that you do is the essence, that is the gift. I would disagree with that, but we don't have to get into that specific discussion. And the sentence ends over here, "V'hi mora shamayim alechem," and let the fear of heaven be upon you. So if they're asking you, we don't want you to, even though you're going to get a gift, okay, there's going to be a reward. do the work as if you're not getting the reward, so you feel like that you're really doing it lishma, you're doing it for heaven's sake, and you're not doing it for this other thing.
Mhm.
Now, the reason he frames it or closes it off with and let the fear of heaven be upon you, because seemingly to do this act where you're going to say like, okay, I'm going to forget the reward, I'm going to try to push that away, and I'm only doing this because I'm your servant and I love you, God. And there's like a real sense of like, sort of like this would be a sort of an easy way to do this because I'm fully in love with you, and that's why I'm doing this. I don't need a reason, I don't need a gift. However, love can waver. You could love sometimes a little less, you could be in a bad mood. And that's why, while that's great that you would want to have that sort of love over there, he frames it, which you should always have it still safeguarded with reverence, because reverence is going to put you in that context of commitment. And then even if you're feeling like a little lazy today, you're still going to go to the gym. But if you're doing it because like you love the idea of going to the gym, the next morning you wake up and you're not into that so much, you're not going. But if you build yourself a system, then you could commit to that as well. So that's just like I think why that's one of the reasons why he finishes it with that concept over there.
Got it. So just to clarify, because and I had a question about this, because in Hebrew it can be both ways, I think. Vei mora shamayim alechem, the fear of heaven be upon you. That means that it's not a result of not expecting a reward. It is what you need to do. Like you said, that you need to do that. That is, when you're not expecting reward, let that guide you or be one of your motivation, or just like
I would say I would say you can't rely just on goodwill and love, as in you should do it because also it's part of the framework and of the reverence of God, as in you're feeling right now that like I must do this.
Right.
I'm submitting myself, and this is the language of the servant, I'm submitting myself to this system.
Right. And what is the term of where is it from? The Irat Hashem. What is the
Reshit Chochma Yirat Hashem?
Right.
The beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. And again, that would be like, is the fear of God, which is putting God at the very top. And once you have located your point of orientation, what you're moving towards, then you could start, okay, that's set. Now I could start opening myself up to wisdom and ideas and context, but I built myself my framing.
Yeah, interesting. It's kind of a physical thing, that fear. It's not necessarily like it's almost kind of like because the awe and fear is right. Kind of a tough word, maybe not the best word for it.
I agree. So I'm saying I wouldn't use fear, like I was saying reverence. Like it's more of like which is closer towards like the feeling of awe. Of it's not, you're not fearing the hand that's going to come down on you right now.
No, it's a tall mountain. It's a big wave. Yeah,
I'm feeling compelled to do this.
Right.
Okay. On to the next chapter.
Yeah, I think that was for my questions.
Okay. Yossi ben Yoezer ish Tzreda ויוסי ben Yochanan ish Yerushalayim קיבלו מהם. יוסי ben Yoezer ish Tzreda אומר, יהי ביתך בית ועד לחכמים, והווה מתאבק באפר רגליהם, והווה שותה בצמא את דבריהם. Yossi ben Yoezer. Yossi would be the nickname for Joseph. So it would be like sort of Joey, son of Yoezer.
Yeah.
A man of Zreda, and Yosef ben Yochanan, a man of Jerusalem, received the oral tradition. Okay, here too we have received kiblu, so we're being told that they receive it without losing anything. Even though there's going to be something that contradicts that, I believe in a moment. Yosef ben Yoezer used to say, let thy house be a house of meeting for the sages, and sit in the very dust of their feet, and drink in their words with thirst. Okay, so let's start here. Yossi ben Yoezer and Yossi ben Yochanan, the two Joeys, kiblu mehem, right? They received from them. Them is, again, going back to Antigonos and the crew, right? They're hanging out. They're constantly going on. So we're introduced to both of these Joeys right now because this is the period of the Zugot. So this is like a 200-year period where during the Second Temple, and you have this is like 150 BC towards close towards the end, towards 30 BCE, and this is before the Tanaim, before the Amoraim. So this is like the early group, and the reason there were Zugot traditionally is because seemingly the Zugot always had some sort of major disagreement in their schools of thought. Mm-hmm. And it was also there to constantly represent that there's always more than one opinion. And the Zugot always came together. And here it's sort of an interesting framing where you're being, let's say, taught a class by two different professors, right? So like you're saying, today we have you're going to be hearing, from lecture A and lecture B. But that was very much like sort of the methodology through the Zugot. And they were known okay, I'm going to be listening from both of them. And I'm constantly having these two ideas being, twisting around. And this relates to, an argument for heaven's sake, right? These are all ideas that we're accepting. Which reminds me back to the last chapter we read with regards to telling you that the students misunderstood what he wrote, Antigonus, and with regards to the reward. That relates also to earlier chapters when they were mentioning about how the sages need to be very careful with their words, because when you're teaching these kind of things, just like a misconception or misunderstanding could suddenly leave someone completely off into a different direction. So that was
and I think it comes back multiple times. And Shotet, I have a note for in a bit, how that analogy of the drinking, and it talks about and later it talks about polluted water.
I'm looking forward to hearing that note. I'm not aware of that one.
It's really cool.
So this is again, this is apropos to this little corner. Let your house be a house of meeting for sages. Okay, so this is sort of to tell you your house is what you make it. The people you invite, you're going to have their jokers. It's going to be a joking house. You're going to have their gangsters. It's going to become a gangster house. If you have their wise men, it'll be a house of wise men. And even if you're not necessarily included in the wise people, it's just saying turn your house into a house of wise people, and it will lend itself to absorb some of that as well. Very much like this little corner, right? So if you're having these conversations online, right? So who are we allowing onto the stream? And there's something beautiful about allowing everyone on. And then there's if you're trying to create a space, which is a vad lachachamim or a meeting for the sages. Now you can be well, we're not sages. We're here for every person. Either way, if you want to create a nurturing environment, you have to be very sensitive who you're bringing into the space. And then we come and say that sit in the very dust of their feet and drink in their words with thirst. So first of all, the dust of their feet have different explanations. One is there's this historical explanation, which is during that time, usually the sages would sit on some sort of pillow or a low bench, and the students would sit on the floor. It's also stressing the fact that the homeowner, which would think oh, it's my house, so I'm going to sit in a chair. No, you're sitting on the ground. Even though it's your house that you just invited them all into, they're still telling you not only did you invite us in, you're going to stand in the kitchen just waving at us. Come sit down on the ground. You're part of the people. Some people look at this as the dust of their feet is even the lowly activities or the mundane activities that they do. You should also follow them and see how they act and see what they do. That you should also be inspired by those things as well. There is another interpretation. I think it's by the Rav Chaim from Volozhin. He says that he uses the play on words avak to lihitavek, to wrestle, and rather when it comes to when there comes to them teaching Torah, then you could wrestle back with them, as in though yes, you're not their equal, but when it comes to them, teaching words of Torah, you should find yourself as a place where you do have the place and the freedom to express yourself, because like we just said, they're arguments for heaven's sake. So he just did like a little twist, a little play on those letters on that word. And v'haya v'havei shoteh betzama divrehem. So here too, this is same idea of one is that you should be drinking their words. Again, this is sort of taking the homeowner and bringing him down to a lower level, as like you're drinking from them. You're not sustaining them; they're sustaining you. And obviously, also you should be very. And I think this might be relating to what you were saying. You should be very specific in, or there should be a lot of intention. Just like you are very, you're thirsty and you want to be drinking all the water you can. When you're receiving from them this wisdom, you need to be very specific about it, because if you are drinking poisoned water, this could be very harmful for you. But if you're drinking actually water to allow you to sustain yourself, then you want to be drinking, pure water.
Yeah, so that makes me think about also when it says sama, it's like you're thirsty. So with thirst, I guess does that mean? And I'm struggling. So this is actually related to even this conversation of like, should I come into this conversation where I do my own research, I do a lot of my own research, or do I come in with the thirst so that I can wrestle with the ideas that you present as somebody with more information about this, right? So am I coming with more thirst, or do I want to? So that is kind of like, it's interesting.
So this specific chapter would be referring to the latter of what you just said, which is come into here. We just created this little space. This is the house that you've invited us into. And so to speak, you're now drinking right now. While I'm saying that, obviously it's an invitation to constantly be doing this, right? So you could take, and what we just said earlier, you could take these ideas, right? And now you go on with these ideas and you start exploring and looking and trying to understand and trying to create yourself like a point of reference, and you come back. And I would say, using the analogy of someone drinking, turn yourself into a vessel, turn yourself into a cup, and turn that cup into in Israel it's called a Tami Arba, but build yourself into like a fancy watering machine all the way to prime water, right? And next thing you know, you have your own water brand company that you're now selling out there and sustaining other people that are just as thirsty. So
Tami 8.
Right. So I would just say, with regards to this, you could always come with your own ideas. However, there's something nice if you are. I'm sort of stuck. These are ideas that are stuck in my head in a certain perspective, and like this is what I know, and I'm just saying like the things I know about this topic. However, for you, this might be being A, B. This is interesting. This relates to this, and you might have things that contradict what I'm thinking about. So that allows you then to like potentially dig deeper and have a fresher take and a newer view on this. So which again would mean you should be thirsty and critical, right? Which is like, I'm not going to drink any water. So if I'm spewing nonsense right now, you should be like, well, I'm not interested in that water.
Right. Yeah. I have a question on something before that. So in Hebrew it says Beit Vad L'Chachamim. So my question is, it doesn't have to say Vad. And the only usage that I would know from it is like vad bait, right? Like a
right.
So what is why is it specifically bet vad and not just house? And maybe you can have a better translation for.
Well, beitcha beit vad. What's the translation over here? The house should be a house of meetings, meeting for the sages. So that is also the translation in the translation in Hebrew of Pirkei Avot. While some look at it as this is a place where people teach Torah, what it would seem on face value is that it should be a house where wise people congregate. And we're going to get this opens up a discussion in the next chapter, which is who you're bringing into your house, because it's less about like, okay, so you just opened up your house is a venue that you rent out to people to give classes. It's more about people look at your house as a place to congregate. You want to have a place where it's open, where people feel like this is the place, this is the campfire, this is where I could discuss, this is where I could be the real. This is a safe space. Now, specifically, while we'll see in a moment where you should have your house open to many people, ideally, it should be a place of vad lechachamim, as in we want to go to Ben's house because in Ben's house, there's the right space and there's the right energy for us to have a sage conversation where we are really talking about ideas and figuring things out. Again, this is not the Beit Midrash. This is not the study hall. This is the Beit Vad.
Right. Interesting.
I think that's a good. Like it's a good point to rest on. I think there's even some translations that say that it should be like a house of rest, as in like sort of like a motel, like allow the sages to sleep by you, even though the two sentences afterwards sort of relate more to like you would be listening to someone give like a class or talk.
Right. Yeah, because different spaces would give you, I mean, they contribute to different kind of dynamics. I'm just thinking about like how even in like technology, you know, like in software, you have in technology, you have the idea of companies running. You can think about like open offices or having the anecdote of having a hall where everybody meets up and having that kind of like conversation that sparks creativity or something like that.
So I think it's that. It's saying that your place should be the house where people can convene and have the ideas. Yeah. And then they might take those ideas later on to the study hall. And you might see that then turn into practice. Maybe they'll disagree. Maybe they'll agree. But the idea is that, and it's also, just thinking about it right now, like you could tell yourself like, okay, when they were in the study hall, they were like studying or like they were lecturing, but where were people just chilling? Where was someone just like getting like, you know, like I want to go to Rav Yossi's house and like I need to have like we need to have like a real just chatting conversation, sort of, right? And the sages are telling us over here, it wasn't happening on the streets, or it wasn't happening, and we know, you know, you shouldn't be gambling, and you're not hanging out in a bar, and you're not hanging out at the beach. So it says like you should turn your house to chill spots, to hangout spots, and ideally hangout spots for the sages.
Yeah, it actually reminds me of even from this corner, the idea of the estuary, of some place,
perfect,
slightly outside, and also with there's less commitment about it, or it's less, because in the midrash you might be saying something and they are going to be taking even more, they're going to have more force on the people around them because you're saying them in a specific place, and then in the court even more so. So it's kind of like this intermediary level.
I think also that's why when you have what we just said about the dust of their feet, putting aside the historical like literal term, there's also, because there's mundane stuff happening there as well. Like you just said, like it could be they were talking about that. It could be they were just having like a deep conversation, not about necessarily Torah stuff, but maybe they're talking about some sort of other political issue, and that even that you should be just like anything their takes, you should be following.
Yeah.
Okay. Onwards. You mind scrolling down?
Yep.
Okay. We are now introduced to Yossi ben Yochanan Ish Yerushalayim. He comes and tells us. He was a character from a second ago, and now he's back. Yehi beitcha patuach lirvacha, v'yihu aniim b'nei beitcha, ve'al tarbe sicha im ha'isha. Be'ishto amru, kal v'chomer be'eshet chaviro. וכאן אמרו חכמים, כל זמן שאדם מרבה שיחה עם האישה, גורם רעה לעצמו, ובוטל מדברי תורה, וסופו יורש גיהנום. Wow, very controversial take. Yossi, Joey, this is one of the Joeys, Ben Yochanan, man of Jerusalem, used to say, and like we said, used to say means this is his thing. Oh, actually, Kachai Omer, he just says Omer, so this is maybe one of his things. Let thy house be wide open, and let the poor be members of thy household. Engage not in too much conversation with women. They said this with regard to one's own wife. How much more does the rule apply with regards to another man's wife? From here, the sages said, as long as a man engages in too much conversation with women, he causes evil to himself. He neglects the study of the Torah, and in the end, he will inherit Gehenna. And on that note, I gotta go. No,
That's
We'll break. We'll try to break that down
later.
Um, okay, so first of all, off the bat, we see Yossi ben Yochanan after his last chapter, our last chapter, he's like doubling down and taking like a way more extreme thing. Because first of all, we were just saying the TLC, I'm having the wise people, I'm talking to my wife, I'm telling her we're going to have the wise people over. Now he's saying your house needs to be wide open, and I need to have poor people in my house. And not only do the poor people need to be in my house, they need to be members of thy household, right? So this is like a pretty extreme take. Some people look at this and say that it's more about don't have servants or many servants and employ the poor. This way, they will be part of your house and they will be able to sort of take on chores and responsibilities in your house, and to be able to be as part of a member. Just to pause on that, in Judaism, we sometimes suffer bad PR with regards to how we relate to Jewish slaves, or the fact that we have slavery in the Bible. And everyone goes gaga about that, right? So how do we have that? However, we should stress, and this relates to this, that in general, Judaism, when they are punishing someone with slavery, the attitude was, if I punish this man that stole, that is the real punishment. If I'm just sending him to jail, instead, I'm going to invite him into my house where he could see how a normal house functions. This is supposed to be corrective surgery, mental surgery, or for this slave. And that's why the Torah makes it very clear that if there's no food, if there's very little food, he gets food first. And if there's only one bed, he gets the bed, because we're not here to punish. We are here to educate. That's why at the end of a significant period of time, if the slave doesn't want to leave, right? That's like a thing. Because you want him to be free ultimately, but why would he want to stay? And the reason he'd want to stay is not because like it's Stockholm syndrome. It's because he has turned into a member of the house.
But also, isn't he? It's sort of there is a punishment, or there is something that is done for him for wanting to stay, because he's supposed to want to be a free person.
Right. His ears get pierced.
Yeah.
Right. So
just because the goal is that he will be released, he will be free. So if you don't want to be free, you're actually going to be. It's less ideal.
That also relates to the Nazarite, the Nazir, who has to bring a sacrifice, a repentance sacrifice, because even though you've reached this holy level, you did so by refraining from some of the godly gifts, worldly gifts that God gave us, and because of that, you also need to repent. So here too, ideally, you don't want to be a slave forever, and the slave himself is more about to turn into a job, and there is a communal corrective element to it as well, to the person. So here too, the idea would be, one of the translations would be, don't have many servants, rather employ the poor people in your surroundings, and that obviously assists them.
And now a question about still on the poor people. Does it mean does that mean should your house members be poor, or should you let the poor become your house members?
You should let the poor people become your house members. Even though I recently saw this Israeli investor that became some multimillionaire, left with his whole family, like his big villa, and moved into like this small little poorer town in Israel. And he's just lives in this tiny little apartment. And he's now explaining to his kids, he's like, if you want a lot, you need to give a lot. And if you've received tons, you need a sacrifice. You need to give. And he's about helping with his kids, building their little gardens and watering their plants. So, here too, you want to create a space where your kids are aware of giving, where the sense of being part of the community is not only walking by and, one should practice what he preaches is very difficult because, like, my son asks me when we're walking down the street, like, why am I not always giving to like the poor people on the street? Why am I not giving them money? And I tell him that, like, Abba has, like, I have different organizations that I give money to all the time. And like, I'm in my head as I'm explaining that to him, I'm like, yeah, but he's not seeing that. Like, he doesn't see that I have like these, like, for them. And I'm explaining to him, I'm like, they work on cancer. He's like, cancer, not cancer. This person doesn't have socks on. So like, I don't know about like what organizations you're doing. And the question is, how do you embody that to the kid? How do you show that like this is something that you're taking on? And while the Torah systemizes it, right, and says like you need to give a percentage, a 10% of your earnings towards not philanthropy, but towards charity, and you have the ideas of like leaving portions of like your field, the pe'ah or the shichecha, you're leaving it for the poor person to take. But it's as if it's a reality that's always going to be there. There's always going to be the poor person. And that's why like it's sort of like cyclical. Even the poor person is required to give charity, right? He himself has to recognize like the humanity of the other and gives his charity through the cycle. But the idea is that as much as possible, you should try to embrace them fully into your home. And while that doesn't mean, they didn't say over here, it should be their house, right? Or like, now remove your kid out of the house. Rather than allow them the dignity of feeling like they're part of you, like they're part of the community. They're not just the other on the street. Rather, they might even end up going back to sleep under the bridge that evening. But they ate by you soup, they cleaned the dishes, they felt valuable, you said thank you, that whole thing happened. And ideally, while they were doing that, they were part of the Vad Chachamim. They sat there as well and they heard that.
And they wrestled.
Exactly. Okay, so now let's take a step back before we get into this conversation. Like, where is this coming from? Don't engage not in too much conversation with the women. Like, where is this coming from?
So Donnie asked about this.
It's coming in. Women. One second. I was wondering about this. What do the first two sentences about the poor have to do with the rest of the Mishnah? Okay, first of all, hello, Donnie. I hope all's well with you and your family. Okay, so fantastic question. Now, we just said have your home open for the poor people, and we said have your home open earlier for the Vad Chachamim. So this guy is inviting everyone into, this is like the block party, right? So even though it would seem like, like in religious communities, like there's a big separation between women and men, here it's making it clear that the reality is if your door is open, everyone's coming. There's going to be a lot of women there. Not only there's going to be a lot of women there, your friend's wife is going to be there because everyone's having the party at Ben's house. So the Mishnah is now giving you like what happened next, right? Like you're right now, we're that guy again. We're the Vad Chachamim. The Vad Chachamim came on Tuesday, okay? And Cheryl was there and Chani was there. And now it's Tuesday and there's more people in the house. Some of the poor people over there. And now I'm running around and I'm doing my thing. And now the question starts right now, okay? So first, am I having this discussion, right? So let's break down these discussions. What does this mean? And the Torah lets us know when they say don't have a conversation with a woman, they said this with regards to one's wife, right? So what does this mean? Al tarbeh sicha. Some people said is don't have. There's extreme takes about this, about like don't have any nonsense conversation with your wife. And Chazal looked at this as being like really, we're talking about like the Desperate Housewives, or we're talking about, I don't know, like which Gucci shoes, or some mundane conversation that you should be having. And that's why you shouldn't be having a lot of that conversation. Notice though, it didn't say al tarbeh. It didn't say that you shouldn't have it at all. Rather, they're saying Chazal recognizes, the rabbi recognizes there is need. Well, before I go there, when it says don't engage in too much conversation, we're talking about, again, the mundane conversation. As in, if you want to have a deep conversation with your wife, you're talking about your livelihood, the kids, relationship, love. Speak for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, because those are true, real conversations. You're learning with your wife. All that is A-okay. So people tend to look at this mean like don't speak to women in general often or for long engagement. It's not. We want you to engage with your significant other. However, we don't want the conversation to be mundane, purposeless, for no reason. Having said that,
is sikha something that points to that? Did you say that? The sikha specifically?
yeah, well, that's how they're interpreting sikha, what the sikha means. Having said that, it didn't say lo tedaber ima isha sikha murpa. It says al tarbeh, and tarbeh is because even in Shimshon Raphael Hirsch says this, Rabbi Hirsch says this, that the Chazal recognize that there's still the place where you're coming home and you want to just joke around and you want to talk about the nothingness. That's fine. There's that social lubricant. There's that conversation you want to have. And the Torah recognizes that there is filler. You could do that. You could crack a joke. You could be able to be, well, I would say being cutesy and cracking a joke is more love conversation that you could have as much as you want of that. But let's say you just want to talk about the nothing. And this, I would say, would relate to watching a movie with your wife or watching a show with your wife, right? Are you guys watching Interstellar and then having a discussion about like God and time travel, or are you just binging a show? And if you're binging a show, then I would say, like, this would be a practical interpretation of this. If you're binging, then try to binge not often. And when like you guys both need just to like, the kids were crazy, we just need to just sit down and do this, and we need this for our mental health right now, then that would be like that would be considered in the lo tarbeh, in the not too much category. But if you just binged all of the 4 seasons, then it's too much. That's like too much mundane, and not enough is happening over there. Then we go to like a stark difference over here, which is kal vachomer, right? Does the rule also apply? How much more so with regards to another man's wife, right? So here it's a meeting letting you know that you are, since your doors are open, obviously you're going to be talking to your wife, and maybe there's going to be some of that mundane conversation when everyone's coming into the house, or you're going to talk about the mundane after they all left, right? We talk about not having lashon hara, the bad tongue or speaking ill about someone else or gossip. However, the Chafetz Chaim himself says that there's lashon hara that is allowed between a husband and wife, because there needs to be a place where when everyone leaves my house, it was all open for everyone. I need to tell her, oh my God, did you see what Cheryl was wearing? Because I need that. And that would be okay. Again, there's some of that. But do we then just want to go bashing on Cheryl for a while? Or is there was that release that we need to be sort of discussing? However,
Right,
because sorry?
It's a balance.
It's a balance.
And you need to have the right balance. Sorry.
And you need to have the right balance. And they quickly safeguard a few, saying like, even when your wife, you're having this balance, I'm letting you know, definitely with your friend's wife, because many people are going to be coming to your house, and they're going to be there as well. And you need to realize that those interactions are going to be happening in your house, and you can't avoid that. You can't avoid that in social life. And there is, and this relates to mekan amru chachamim kol zman she'adam harbe sicha im ha'isha gorem ra le'atzmo. From here, the sages said, as long as a man engages too much conversation with women, he causes evil to himself. And women, and giving the example of his friend's wife again, is there's always a tension. Either it's forbidden fruit, or it's being denied. Like I'm saying, like there's always you're reaching out to someone, and there's a chance that through the words you're going to be very insulted by her. You're trying to engage her, and she's not interesting. And that causes pain, lust, hard emotions. And or you're engaging with someone, and there, like Maimonides says, there's always what Maimonides specifically talks about these kind of conversations with sexual undertones. However, knowing human psychology, there is almost always some sort of sexual undertone under those kind of conversations. And that's why it's and this is very apropos to like the Me Too sort of movement. Like, you're only looking for trouble if you're having these long engaging conversations, which, the famous idea of like, there's no such thing as like a platonic relationship between a man and a boy and a girl, because at some point in their relationship, someone likes someone, someone's interested in someone. And again, this is not to talk about like when you're courting, when you're looking for someone, when you're trying to date. However, and that doesn't mean that in this kind of place you can't meet someone else in this house, right? We're just having the TLC party. I just met another single girl. Why would I not be interested in talking to her? Then the conversation would be like, okay, you're not having the mundane conversation. You're having an appropriate conversation, but start safeguarding yourself. She's your employee, right? That's like your husband's, that's like your friend's wife. She's your friend's wife. She's all the forbidden fruit. You have to realize these things are always going to be introduced in front of you, and you need to be very careful. So the Torah is saying, the Mishnah is saying over here, is causes evil to himself. And evil, I don't look at it as evil as, Satan or the Holocaust evil. Rather, you're causing yourself internal turmoil, or you will cause yourself, you will create havoc with the situation that occurs from that, ruining families, creating drama. So they're really warning you from that.
Yeah, I think so. This actually connects to the discussion, my last discussion with Jacob about in the Tanya, and it talks about a hierarchy of a few things. And it talks about how you could eat, like you can gorge yourself with. Well, if you gorge yourself with non-kosher meat, then that is. I think maybe it says it's not redeemable at all. There is a sense of it where it's like it's coming from the unholy klipot, right? So that's something when you would say, like, if you're talking to your friend's wife and it's mundane, it's less redeemable, right? There's more chance that it will just create something bad. But if you're eating something, and again, if you're eating something and it's for in order for you to have the energy to then study Torah or have an idea about Torah or to lubricate or to like have a better relationship with your spouse, so that you can do more mitzvot, then it's good. It's for the good. But if you're doing it just for the sake of doing it, then you're mevatel Torah, right? You're not doing the things that is supposed to be the highest for you at that moment.
Right. So I would say that relates more to the Sofo Yoresh Genom. Like Mevutal Midivrei Torah, right? He neglects the study of Torah, and this relates back to too much conversation, but more. This is the translation conversation of Sicha, like you were saying. The Sicha is more loose, and it doesn't really have a topic or a framework, and that's why it's because it's sort of limitless. Ultimately, it would lead you to neglecting Torah, because you didn't come and say right now, don't worry, honey, I'm just going to have a 5-minute conversation with Cheryl. Because you said it's just a 5-minute conversation, 5 minutes means between 10 to 15 minutes, right? Like you could tell someone I'll be there in 5 minutes, and that means walking in 20 minutes later being like, what? I said I'm going to be 5 minutes. I didn't mean like actually 5 minutes. But so you could say the 5 minutes were like the limit of what it was permissible, and then you had 15 minutes of just nothing, right? Where there was no topic, there was no safeguard around it, and that's why you're mevatel the Torah, which is what you were talking about. It's like you're already connecting to the klipa. So not only are you not going to receive a reward for this, going back to the previous chapter, which we were talking about, and we're not doing it for the reward. But if it's the Bar Chachamim conversation, if it's the deep, loving, intellectual conversation, I might be getting reward of this. Here, 1, I shouldn't be talking about it. 2, I'm neglecting. 3, there's no reward about it. So, Usafo Yoresh Genom, he will, in the end, he will inherit Gehenna, which doesn't mean like he's going to now be boiling in a boiling hot pot. Rather, he will end up with nothing, with the nothingness. There was no rich conversation. He ended up being either he got into some sort of sexual scandal. He's heartbroken. He wasted his time. He didn't learn anything new. So none of these are taking you to the next place. These are just leaving you in Gehenna, leaving you with the nothingness.
Yeah. I wonder if is there something to do with siach, like a bush? And I'm just trying to think about the physical idea of a bush and how it's like not as a bush is kind of not really defined. It's just like a bush, it's just like a thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's the idea of a sicha. It's like you said, you don't know where it's going to go. It's kind of like this amorphous thing.
I haven't heard that connection, but I'll roll with you that could work. That like this is something that's more. I mean, you could use this also as the burning bush. there's a midrash that like it was resembling of Egypt because it's sort of easy to go in if you put your hand into a thorn bush, but once you take it out, it's very prickly. So you could walk into this conversation very, and but that analogy is being the Egyptians coming into Egypt and it's being very hard for them to leave Egypt. So you could walk into a conversation feeling totally normal, and then you find yourself like an hour in being like, how the hell do I get out of this? Why did I just give all these people secrets? So I could see how that connects. Unfortunately, because I am enjoying this so much. And last time we only did 2, and this time we did 3. Even though I said I could hang out a little longer.
We're getting but
I would say, let's not start the next Mishnah. We'll start the next Mishnah next week. But I have like 2 more minutes. Do you want to just keep on expanding on this idea on the bush?
Well, it's actually interesting. It's interesting that the point that you made about how it's easy to enter, but it's harder to get out. So that makes me think. That makes it, and again, like if you have a conversation, you think, okay, let me just have an easy conversation, and then it turns into ways that you don't know what to do with it, or that you didn't expect it to be. So that's interesting. And the only other thing that's kind of like because obviously this can be controversial in terms of but we kind of discussed it, but it made me think about if this was also trying to tell us, was giving us an implication about what the general conversation between women in that period would be, and then what the conversation between the person that Joey is talking to. Right? So, because I don't know if this is talking to a particular person, right? But I think we touched on that a little bit.
Yeah, I would just stress that they're bringing it up because they're saying this is reality.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're saying like there's going to be women there,
right?
And I think it's letting you know that like you are not going to, nor should you try to escape this. It didn't say like the reaction wasn't so don't have people over, right? They're clearly aware of the fact that they just said have the sages over. Hopefully, one of those sages could be a woman as well. Probably not at that time, but let's leave it open. And definitely once we have that extreme take of have it fully open to everyone, then you're going to have these women over. And like, again, let's just play out in this scenario, which is like, what, I'm going to have a poor women over. Like it might start with, it might just be, there's a lot of men are coming over, but because a lot of men are coming over, your wife has just invited her whole knitting club, and her knitting club is there to help her serve. And then the conversation starts. People are talking, people are schmoozing. So I actually look at this as quite progressive. They're saying like the house is a mixed house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, Donnie has no more questions. I usually can't join at this time, but I decided to indulge myself. Okay, so I'll just let him know that next time he could join as well. Next time, join with your cam. All right, sir, this was enjoyable as last time, and onwards and upwards.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it as well.
We'll talk, man.